On my initial blocking, I was planning my character to give both short sword slashes, more for a pure choreograph purpose, showcasing his range of action than going toward the viewer, which is an idea that came later on during the blocking stage. The idea was to take one step for one sword strike. So I've pushed my character torso controller forward. As usual, I'm cancelling the rotation for the chest and the hips so that I can rebuild this rotation and avoid any bugs. From there, I keep the pushing foot on the ground. As my character will first strike with the left arm, I need to move forward the right leg. And since I've initially made the mistake here, I've just copy and pasted the previous pose from the feet. Just select your foot controller, go on the previous keyframe, press Ctrl C, and then on the next pose, press Ctrl V, so that you have the matching position and orientation for your foot. Once you have those little tips in mind, the next step is to build a strong pose. We can clearly see the character pushing with his left leg. There is a nice twisting between the hips and the chest. The shoulder line is supporting the sword line to a super straight and sharp line. Finally, I'm trying to keep both eyes of the character visible and is watching toward the next strike. From there, I've just repeated the process onto the other side. I first used the center of gravity or torso root controller of my character, cancelled its rotation, moved it to the side. I've kept the right foot that is now the pushing foot into its current pose, then move forward the left foot that become the lead foot and start building my new pose. My new line of action does contrast a lot with the previous one, with an opposite direction and an opposite curvature. From there, don't forget to check everything about your strong pose, clear silhouette, balance, try to keep both eyes visible, and try to build simplicity versus complexity. The next pose is the one where the character will spawn the double-handed sword, and it also serves as an anticipation for the next strike. As usual, I've cancelled the rotation on the torso root controller on the hips and the chest, and I'm rebuilding the pose. The weight of the character is slowly shifting toward his left leg. The little trick here is that the right leg is not pushing the character, but gets pulled from its previous position. All the weight is on the left leg. So right toes are currently dragging a bit on the ground, getting mostly aligned with the foot shape, then being squashed on the ground, creating a hard angle with the foot as if they were pushing. I've built quite an heroic pose with a triangular or pyramidal shape. The only thing that currently bothers me here is not seeing the right eye. Other than that, I took the time to pose the left hand as it's reaching the handle of the sword. For the time being, I'm posing both arms in forward kinematic. I'm not using inverse kinematic yet. And I won't be switching unless it does help me to pose the character. For the next pose, I really wanted something super extreme. This animation is about showing our character's skills, and this should be its ultimate move. And a great power involves a great anticipation. This is a pose I've reworked for the final animation because it didn't fit with the sword trick the character was doing. But it was a very strong and interesting pose nonetheless, because there is a lot of cheating going on in this pose. Most of it is built to work from the camera point of view. The right leg is overly stretched to create a nice line of action, and the left hand is not even grabbing the handle because it was useless here and would have destroyed a bit the shape of the left elbow. The next pose is kind of the ultimate pose for this animation. It's the two-handed sword strike. I've kept the right foot location, but I've flattened it on the ground as most of the weight of our character is shifting onto this foot. So now you can see that the left leg gets stretched a lot. While it does work when the character is trying to reach a point, like you are pulling the character toward the stretched point, it doesn't really work whenever your character is pushing. The leg looks a little thinner, and so it doesn't look as muscular as it is. So I prefer to move the left foot forward and then rotate the heel so that we have a slight bend in the knee. Another important point is the rotation of the chest. It's twisted toward the leading hand. The right hand is pulling the sword down and backward, providing the strength, while the left hand is here to drive or guide the sword. The shoulders were also heavily edited to get to this pose. You should consider the shoulders as being the root of the arm. They are as important for the arm than the root torso for the chest and hips. I'm insisting here with the shoulders because this is one of the main mistakes I see on beginners and average level animators. After this pose, I was initially planning to create a pulling pose. I wanted to communicate the weight of the blade, so the character would almost struggle to pull the sword back. While the current pose does communicate weight, it also communicates weakness of the character that is not able to lift the sword. So during one of the first review of the current blocking, it was decided to change the end of the animation, showing that the character can handle this big sword with one hand, throwing it backward and then catching his trident with a more choreographed motion. So I won't go deeper on those poses as I'm going to modify them later on. On the next videos we will focus on the new choreographic choices and the poses that were used in the final version.